Hi everyone. In mentoring today, we are going to gather some data. We have already created a question. Here's an example of what we've done. We have already created our experimental questions that we want to explore. We've already written a rationale for why that is important. We've already written a hypothesis for what we think will happen. And now I'm going to show you how to use this website so that we're able to get our data to figure out the answer to our question. I'll just introduce mine so far. My question is African American mtDNA more similar to African mtDNA or English mtDNA? The rationale for this is an interesting question to explore because African Americans are descendants of many different ethnic groups, including Africans and also possibly Europeans. African men and women were brought to the Americas and the Caribbean through the Atlantic slave trade, but there were also European settlers in this area. Since many of these settlers were from England, I'm choosing these three groups to compare. My hypothesis is that African American mtDNA is more similar to African mtDNA than English mtDNA, because many of the English settlers were men. Many of these African slaves were both men and women. Since mtDNA is inherited from mothers, I think that African American mtDNA will more closely resemble African mtDNA. Then I've prepared my two data tables, and this is what you'll have to do as well before you use our website. This will help you organize your data. So my first table will be African American versus African, and I've chosen Yoruba samples. I'll show you in a minute why. My second data table is African American versus English samples. So let's go back to the website, and I'll show you how to both use the website to gather your data and also put the data into your data table. This is what we'll be working on in mentoring. All right, so first you're going to go to this website called bioservers.org. When you get to this website, you'll enter the sequence server. Now, before we can make comparisons, we have to choose some groups. So we'll go to Manage Groups. So I clicked up here, Manage Groups, and I got this pop-up. I'm going to click down to Modern Human mtDNA. Since I'm comparing European, African, and here we go, African American mtDNA, I choose these three, and I click OK. Great. Within the African mtDNA, there are a few different options. For mine, I've chosen Yoruba. I did a little research and learned that Yoruba people primarily live in the western part of Africa, and this is where many of the slaves were taken. So I'm going to compare these 5 Yoruba samples. For African American, I have 3 samples, and I'm going to use all 3. For European, I have my English samples right here, 1, 2, and 3. In order to make a sample, I need to first click on just 2. I want to compare only 2 samples at one time. So first I'm going to compare, what does my data table say? African American versus Yoruba samples. If you remember, I had 5 Yoruba samples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 3 African American samples. So I want to compare each African American to each Yoruba sample. So let's start with just Yoruba 1 and African American 1. And we'll take out the European one for now. So I want to compare Yoruba 1 to African American 1. Just so I have my data all organized, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to first write Yoruba number 1 versus African American number 1. Now back to the website, I'll click these 2 and I'll hit compare. What the website will do was align both of these fragments and highlight in yellow wherever there are differences. First, I want you to notice here they are all highlighted in yellow, but for African American 1, there's no nucleotide here. That means we don't know what the nucleotide is, so we will not count it. So let's scroll down. Here's one difference. We can see everything else here is the same. Here's our first difference. So this is one difference. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Down here, since it gets a little bit weird, we are not going to count anymore. When you see so many unknown nucleotides, even when you see ones that you know, you shouldn't trust it because you're not always 100% sure. So we'll go back up. We're only counting then the ones in here. So we had 12 differences. So right here we'll write 12. It'll also help to write down how many are the total number of nucleotides. Well, the total number of nucleotides that are aligned is 500. So this goes, oh, excuse me, it's not 500. If you go up here, you'll see that it is 726. So you'll write in 12 out of 726. Next, we're going to keep, so we have our data for the first one. Next, we're going to keep Yoruba 1, but we'll change African American 1 to African American 2 because these are two different people. We'll click compare, and while it's comparing, we'll write this in. Yoruba number 1 versus African American number 2. Okay, so we go here. We can see here that on this sample, there's actually 1,122 samples. So, oh, excuse me, not samples, nucleotides. So that's how many are total. Let's count up the number of differences. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And now it gets kind of weird. So I'll write in 14. This is how you use the Bioservers website. Whenever you choose which samples you want to compare, you click and unclick the different squares right here. If you wanted to compare these two, African American 2 to England 1, you'd unclick this and just compare those two. Right here will always show you the total number of aligned nucleotides. And I want to remind you, always skip any of the different yellow blocks if there's not something listed below. And only go with where you see that a lot of the nucleotides are similar, but there's 1 or 2 differences. When you're done with your data, you'll be able to make some greater conclusions. But first, you have to gather all of your data. This is how you use the website. I'm looking forward to seeing all of your work. And please let me know if you have any questions.